Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Walnut Crusted Chicken. That's right, I love any technique that makes me forget I'm eating boneless, skinless chicken breasts. And crusting it with nuts is one of those techniques. Except these type of recipes usually have two big problems. One is they're almost always too sweet. And also, as soon as you cut in, all the nuts fall off the surface. And instead of a nut crust, you end up with a nut crumble. But with the method I'm about to show you, we've addressed both those problems with the same solution. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with what I'm calling the nut glue, which will start with a whole bunch of freshly crushed garlic. And as any prep cook will tell you, as it dries, there is very few things as sticky as garlic. And then to that, we will add some Dijon mustard for some acidity and tanginess. And then last but not least, some freshly picked and lightly chopped thyme leaves. And once that's in, we'll go ahead and give this a stir. And I love the thyme here because it's kind of citrusy and very subtly resinous, which I think is going to pair perfectly with the richness of the walnuts. But of course, if you want to use another herb, go ahead. I mean, you are after all the Lucy-Lou of your nut glue. Oh, and speaking of Kill Bill, if you're going to make this for guests, make sure none of them have a tree nut allergy, since that will definitely put a damper on things. But anyway, we'll go ahead and mix that up and set it aside while we move on to prep our chicken breasts. And by prep, I simply mean generously season on both sides. And today I'll be using a mixture of kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and cayenne. Oh, and as you might have noticed, these chicken breasts did not have the fillets or tenderloins attached, which really doesn't make that big of a difference, except if yours do, it's going to take a little longer to cook. And I actually prefer it that way. But this will work fine with or without. And sure, if you wanted to, you could just season the nut glue. But I think by seasoning the meat directly, we have a little more control and a better feel for how much we're putting on. And that's it. One season, we'll go ahead and spread over our mustard and garlic mixture. And if I wasn't filming this, I probably would have used my hands to smear this over. But the spoon is fine as long as you get full coverage. Okay, so make sure you spread that all over. At which point, we're going to go ahead and pop that in the fridge until we're ready to use it. And by the way, you could do this step hours ahead if you want, or even overnight probably, even though I've never tried that. And then the only other thing we're going to have to do here is chop some walnuts. And for that, today I'll be using something called a mezzaluna, which in case you're wondering translates to half luna. And while this is not really any faster, and actually probably a little bit slower than doing it with a knife, it does look a lot cooler. Plus, since both hands are on the knife, that leaves exactly 0 hands to get cut. Oh, and if you're thinking, Nigella Lawson uses that tool a lot. Yes, she does, which is where I saw it for the first time. And for the record, she was a big and very early inspiration for me doing the show. But anyway, one way or another, we're going to chop those nuts fairly fine. And then once that's been completed, we can go ahead and pull our chicken out of the fridge and begin to walnut the surface, pressing very firmly as we do. And it's not just like we're tossing on one handful and patting and that's it. All right, we're tossing some on, we're patting them down, we're tossing more on, we're patting them down. All right, doing that to both sides, of course. And not just the surfaces. We got to make sure we get the sides as well. And I have no idea why I'm using such a small plate here, since I didn't want this to appear harder than it is. But anyway, we will coat those generously on both sides. And even though at this point it might not seem like those are stuck on very well, and that they might easily fall off, as you'll see, they won't. Because as our mustard and garlic nut glue dries, it actually gets really sticky, and it's going to hold on to our nuts very firmly. If that is, we give it enough time to dry. Which is why once these chicken breasts get coated very generously on both sides, we're going to transfer this back into the fridge uncovered for at least an hour. Okay, try to give it 2 or 3 hours if you can. And that is what's going to give our glue enough time to work properly. So I did pop mine in the fridge for about an hour and a half, at which point we can go ahead and pull them out and pan them up. And before we transfer those in, we do want a generous drizzling of olive oil in the bottom. Oh, and if you have leftover nuts, you don't have to throw them away. You can actually use them to garnish a salad, but you do need to roast them first, since they've been touching raw chicken. So if you are going to use them, make sure you cook them first. And then what we'll do once those have been placed in is go ahead and sprinkle a little bit of salt over the top, as well as we will finish off with a light but thorough drizzling of olive oil. And that's it. Our walnut crusted chicken is now ready to transfer into the center of a 375-degree oven for about 25 minutes or so, or until everything is cooked through and our walnuts are lightly toasted. And if everything goes according to plan, it should look a little something like this. And then what we're going to want to do as soon as these come out is transfer those onto a plate to rest for about 5 minutes while we use our pan to make a pan sauce, which, as you may know, are exactly where pan sauces are made. So what we'll do is place that over high heat, and we'll add a little bit of chicken stock or broth, or if times are tough, a little bit of water, as well as a spoon of Dijon, and then just a little touch of honey for some sweetness to balance out the sharpness of the mustard. And we will go ahead and stir that all together, and then bring it up to a boil on high heat. Of course, being very careful not to burn ourselves on the handle, since this came right out of the oven. Okay, so make sure you keep a towel in your hand and or on the handle. And then all we're going to do is let this boil for a few minutes until it roughly reduces by about half. And that's it. We're going to be left with a very nice pan sauce or jus to serve with our walnut crusted chicken breast. And by the way, I went ahead and strained mine because I have to take some pictures, but you really don't need to. But either way, we'll go ahead and spoon that around or on our chicken, or both. And that's it. Our walnut crusted chicken with honey mustard pan sauce is ready to enjoy. So let me grab a fork and knife and dig in. And yes, once again, I've somehow managed to have the smaller, skinnier end instead of the beautiful fat end facing the light. So I'll be starting with that. But you know what? It did not matter. Because that, my friends, was just an amazingly delicious bite of food. Okay, above and beyond its great taste and texture, that crust really helps keep the chicken moist, even if you happen to maybe cook it a little too much. Like, for example, the suggested FDA internal temp of 165. Even if you cook it that far, this will still be beautifully moist and juicy. And then as far as the taste goes, like I said earlier, these recipes tend to be very, very sweet. But thanks to our mustardy, garlicky nut glue, this is very savory and not at all sweet. All right, we have a little bit of natural sweetness coming from the walnuts, but that's about it. Which is why, by the way, that little bit of honey in our pan sauce works so well. And maybe the most impressive compliment I can give this is that at no time while I was eating this was I thinking, this is boneless, skinless chicken breast. Okay, it never occurred to me, since this really does eat like something off the bone covered in fatty skin. So to summarize, I love everything about this technique, which is why I really do hope you give it a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.